his wife Betty used to be my babysitter when I was just a little child. Anyway, I went asking for a job, and the only job he had available at the time was the restaurant was out in front, right on the sidewalk, and right behind it was a house where they lived. And between the house and the next building next door, it was about as wide as my bedroom, maybe, what, 12, 15 feet. And it was about 60, maybe 80 feet long, and it was full of junk. Well, Ralph thought, well, he'll hire this kid and see if what he can do back there with that. He didn't think I could do it in a month. So anyway, he hired me. Well, I went back there and cleaned that mess up in about 2 days. And he was surprised that I was such a good worker. So he hired me. And the fun began at that time working for him in this restaurant. Ralph used to make donuts the old-fashioned way. He would actually roll out the dough on a table and then use a round thing, and he'd cut out the donuts and throw them on his thumb and then he'd let them rise. Well, in order to keep this table going, he actually moved the table so it was right in front of the glass window, which was right on the sidewalk. So one day he had me in the back room, washing baking pans and stuff like that in the back room. Well, it was a straight line from the back room right to that window. So here he was cutting out the donuts. I was washing pans, and all of a sudden I heard a swish, splat. Well, what the heck? I turned around and here was a blob of dough about that big hanging on the wall. I thought, oh, okay. So I waited a few minutes until he wasn't paying any attention, and I grabbed that big blob of dough and I threw it all the way through the restaurant right up to the front window. Splat! Well, then here it comes back to me again. Then when it was my turn, I just wasn't looking. I grabbed the dough and threw it up to the front window, and just at that time there was a little old lady standing up by the glass watching him make the donuts, when here comes this dough, splat, right in front of her face, on the glass, of course. She almost fainted right on the spot. Ralph had to run out and get her, pick her up, and comfort her. And that happened to be Halloween time. And one of my buddies, whose father was the bishop, we had made a dummy out of an ugly old mask, and, a shirt and pants all stuffed with rags. And we used that dummy as part of a Halloween joke. Well, then he tried, his family had moved from a very large old house. They had moved right next door to a smaller house. I don't know why, probably for rent or something. And that big house stayed empty for a long time. The front entrance, you open the door and there's sort of a vestibule, and this is the kind of house where when you walk in the front door, then the stairs went up and up and up around this open part. I'm not sure what you call it, with a little chandelier hanging.
Entryway.
Entryway, yeah. So my buddy, he started, come on over, I want you to see the still I've got upstairs. You don't have any still upstairs. Oh yeah, we got a still upstairs. Well, he knew how to get in this house even though it was closed up by going in through the basement. Dark at night. So we went down the basement, up through the kitchen, out into the dining room, and I was standing in front of him and he was behind me. Just as we got into the dining area, he had a flashlight, and he lifted that flashlight up into the entryway and screamed. He screamed. Well, what he had done is taken our dummy and with a noose hung it from that chandelier. And I saw that and I went, right to my knees. So I said, I'm going to get you one day. It might take a while. So anyway, we took the dummy, and still Halloween, We took it out, and Ralph knew what we were doing, the owner. We put this dummy in one of the booths for the restaurant. And we kind of made a mess there. We spilled some coffee and made a mess of the table. So Ralph is waiting on a customer who wanted a bunch of donuts. And Ralph was the epitome of charm. And he was talking to this little old lady, but what kind of donuts do you want and everything. He says, oh, Merle, would you call the cops and see if we can get that guy out of here? And went back loading the donuts. The lady turned around, glanced, and then she turned around and glanced again and ran out the door, left her donuts behind. We never did figure out why he went broke. One night I was tending the restaurant while Ralph and his wife had gone on a date or something. So I'm there alone. There's hardly anybody around. A young man or a woman about college age out on a date came in for something after they'd been out. Sat in a booth, got to back up a little bit. Back in the 1920s, it was very popular to order what's known as a phosphate drink. You would order a fruit drink like a lemonade, and you would put about a quarter of a teaspoon of this acid phosphate, which is an odorless, colorless liquid, but it is not tasteless. So you put about a quarter of a teaspoon in a big lemonade, and it would give it zing, like we do nowadays with carbonated drinks. So this young man and lady came in, and I went over to see what they wanted. She ordered a cup of coffee and a donut. He said he wanted the same thing with arsenic. Anybody not know what arsenic is? Deadly poison. So I said, okay, went away.
He's just joking.
Well, he said he wanted arsenic. I took him at face value. So anyway, I poured them their cup of coffees and the 2 donuts, and brought them over to the table, went back behind the counter, drinking my root beer, and all of a sudden there was this bloody scream, loud, ah, this guy screaming his head off. And I ran over and I said, what's the matter, what's the matter? He said, what'd you put in this coffee? I said, I had put a teaspoon of this acid phosphate in his coffee. And I told you we put a quarter of
a teaspoon?
a small amount in a drink. So I went, what's the matter, what's the matter? What'd you put in this drink? I said, well, you asked for arsenic, didn't you? And he turned as white as these walls. But his lady friend quickly caught on to what was loud, and she was just laughing her head off. Never saw him again. I don't know what happened. One time, Ralph and his wife, they had a little sports car called a Singer. They don't make them anymore. But it was a little car like an MG, except it was 4 passengers, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And they belonged to a little sports car club. And oftentimes after their sports car club meeting, they would all come back to the restaurant for coffee and donuts and whatnot. So this night, I was watching the store while they were off having fun. Well, coming back from their sports car club meeting, they got a little bit carried away, and they were racing through the town of Stockton. Well, the police don't like that. So the police were chasing them. They all came and parked in the service station right next door to the restaurant. But the only car that the police actually recognized was Ralph's Singer. So he came rushing in the door, said, give me your apron, give me your apron. Here's the keys, getting lost. So he wanted me to get his car out of the way so the police couldn't find him. So I went off someplace, went over and found the bishop's son. He had an old trombone that was actually bent, but it still made noise. So we got the trombone, went back over to the service station parking lot, got down on our hands and knees and crept along the sidewalk till we got in front of the restaurant. It was a hot summer night, and all it had was a swamp cooler. So I left the front door open so far. And so we crept along, and all the people were inside enjoying their coffee and their donuts. And we stuck that trombone in the door and went, and you never saw so much coffee fly in your life. Of course, then we ran like crazy. Annalie, you said something about LOL? What?
The LOL.
Well, that's
You
the
did, you
little
started
thing.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Let's see, what else is there?
Okay, I'm gonna turn it off so that I can have a separate file here
Yeah.
for a second. Well, I think you've covered all of the antiques, you know, the stories about the donut shop.
Yeah.
But what about, since you were driving bus, you've had a couple of interesting stories like,
Oh, yeah.
like, bus driver, tell us to sit down.
Oh, yes. Well, that was actually ready? That was actually the school bus that I was driving when I first moved up here to Idaho Falls. I had retired and needed a job, and I got a job driving the school bus. Well, one night I went down to the local library to get a book, and there was 4 little girls that all drove in my bus. 3 of them were siblings, and 1 was a neighbor. Well, they were all excited to learn that school bus drivers do something else besides drive school bus. So they had to introduce me to their parents, and then as it happened, we all walked out together, and as it occurred, our 2 cars were parked side by side with a cement walkway in between. Well, as I got into my car, I heard the 4 little girls yell, Merle, come and tell us to sit down. Because I was always telling the kids in the school bus, sit down, you can't stand up, sit down. So I looked over, and here they were in their parents' minivan, all standing up. They couldn't stand straight up, they had to bend over a little bit. But they're all in a row, all standing up. So I got out of my car, and I walked over there, and in my meanest, gruffest voice, I said, all right, you guys, everybody sit down. And giggle, giggle, giggle. They all sat down. They thought that was just the greatest thing. I loved those little children on the school bus. That's probably the best job I ever had. The least paying job, but it was the most enjoyable. I just loved those little kids. There was one little girl that could not sit down. She just, like she had ants in her pants or something. She was constantly standing up. Well, I could see her in my mirror. School buses have a big mirror. And I was constantly having to tell her to sit down. I was absolutely sure that she hated me. So, as it turned out, her parents moved to a different apartment. She still went to the same school, but she didn't ride my bus anymore. So one afternoon, we're waiting for all the children to get on board the bus, and I happened to notice out of the corner of my eye, she was walking down the sidewalk. I didn't think anything of it, didn't pay any attention, but before I knew what had happened, she had run up the stairs and planted a kiss right on my cheek, and then ran like crazy. So I thought, well, she doesn't hate me after all. After constantly telling her to sit down. What else? I can't think of any more right now.
And some little girls give you some notes or cards at Christmas or something?
Oh yes, parents. Oh, and there was one year at the end of the school year, I think it was my last year of driving the school bus, the children had, on their own had made a card, like a birthday card. And there must have been 20 kids, 20, all signed their name to this card and gave it to me. They didn't know I wasn't coming back for the next year yet, because I hadn't told them. But I loved the kids. For like Halloween and stuff like that, I always had a bag full of candy for them, and I'd give them some as they got off the bus. I wouldn't let them reach in the bag, because they'd grab handfuls, especially some of the boys would. But I'd give them a piece of candy every time. And They're
That's
just the
why they
sweetest.
loved you, because you did things like that.
Well, especially in the afternoon, they didn't all load at once. They came out in little dribs and drabs. So while we're waiting for them to load, they would like to stand around my chair and talk to me. And most of the time, I couldn't understand a word they were saying. But I'd say, yeah, that's great, wonderful, you know. Just give them a little attention, that's all they needed. Because they didn't get much attention from their parents. But they were just the sweetest things. What else? Can you think of something?
Well, I was thinking about some of your experiences with trains. Do you want to tell us about your love of trains?
Well, yeah. I've grown up enjoying trains. I think it comes from when I was from age 6 till I went on a mission. The Western Pacific Railroad went just a block and a half on the west side of my house. And the prevailing wind came from the railroad track right across my house. These trains, they're steam engines, but in California they didn't use coal. They had oil burners for the engine. So as these trains would go by in the evening and the breeze would bring that oil smoke into my bedroom, and I loved it. And I think that's where my love of trains started. And I've just always had trains, model trains now. Right now I have a corner cabinet with probably 100, you think, Emily?
Or way more than that?
Maybe more than 100 little miniature trains of all different sizes, made of every material you can think of. I have some made of crystal with little brass wheels that actually you move it along the floor or something, and the wheels turn and the rods go, and the box cars, little doors that open. They're real tiny, you have to move them. But it's my trains. I tried for a long time to build a model railroad with electric trains, but that's a very expensive and time-consuming hobby. And so I never did get much of it. One time when Mark was just a tiny boy, a child, he wanted to go down and see the trains. So he and I drove down to the railroad track, and we were standing out there by the tracks looking around, and he says, "Grandpa, make the train go by." I couldn't do that. But we did find a nail. Railroads have for many, many years used a little nail about this big with the year imprinted on the top of it. And that's how they marked various parts of the railroad, like bridges or parts of
So they can keep track of